Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax had a chance after practice to interview the wide receivers last night, and there's some other players also that were out there, but Austin Mack is a guy that I interviewed and did a story. If everybody can get on the site and read that story and watch our video interview with him, and you know, he's very close friends and roommates with Dwayne Haskins, and it's not that Austin Mack doesn't have a dog in the fight or anything. Of course he wants the best for Dwayne Haskins, but he was just going on and on, just gushing about Dwayne Haskins, how he leads the receivers, how when they get out of their breaks, the ball is right there accurately, and how he can make any throw on the field. And they even have a nice little slogan. It's corny, but it's good, keeping in mind that Haskins is number 7 and Mack is number 11. It is 7-11 is always open. So, and I like the other receivers too. Terry McLaurin had a big game. KJ Hill looks really good. This whole receiving core looks really, really good. But this Haskins-Mack connection backs might be something special.
Yeah, the 7-11 being always open was never more obvious than the play against Oregon State where Austin Mack had a receiver literally on his back and Haskins didn't care and gunned in a perfectly accurate pass right into his chest for a first down inside the Oregon State 10-yard line. It is amazing, Dave, what these receivers look like when they have a quarterback who accurately throws the ball and makes a quick decision and gets them the ball in stride. It's amazing how much better the exact same receivers look whenever you have a quarterback who is able to throw to where the ball needs to be. This is exactly what people were talking about last year, wanting to see a difference in the passing game. And this is exactly what we're going to get this entire season, is a power-armed quarterback who can accurately throw to receivers, who makes good, fast decisions. And guess what? All of these receivers are going to have a very big season with Dwayne Haskins throwing the ball. And every defense that has to try to find a way to defend this team is going to lose its mind, because instead of a quarterback taking up 20 runs, you have another NFL tailback getting another 15 or 20 carries in a game. And these receivers are going to have to be defended literally 50, 60 yards downfield at any point in time because Haskins can hit the Cardale Jones bomb. That's something we haven't had since Cardale Jones. And then when Ohio State last had Cardale Jones, Dave, what happened with Cardale Jones in the postseason in 2014?
And obviously the receivers look really good. It's one game. I get it's a small sample size, but they looked really, really good. And by far and away, the number one reason is Dwayne Haskins. But I also think...
But it's not just this game, though. It's not just this game. The receivers looked better against Michigan when he came in. It's amazing what happens when you hit a guy in stride and they can run for 35 yards because they have an easy catch. It's accuracy.
And they've been gushing about him. Even his redshirt year, you had, the 2016 season, we were down there covering the Fiesta Bowl. Never forget Corey Smith, who was still on the team, and then he tried to cover his tracks later. Like, nothing against JT. He made the comment something like, yeah, sometimes I feel like Dwayne Haskins should be our starting quarterback, and it's like, whoa. And then, that was when Dwayne was redshirting in 2016. So, yeah, we've been hearing for a while. And
remember Micah Parsons last year?
Yeah,
remember Micah Parsons when you visited?
Oh, yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
This is not like here's the truth. A lot of people are going to be grumpy because, seriously, everybody thinks it at this point. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of people who are going to think this is just gratuitously taking shots at JT Barrett, who is a good Buckeye and a winner and a lot of things for Ohio State that were very positive. But he wasn't a better quarterback than Dwayne Haskins. And I know it's one game, and I know everybody's like, oh, man, wow, this is amazing, but it's only Oregon State, and hey, JT's a winner and this and that. Haskins beat Michigan. Of course he's going to drill Oregon State. I'm fascinated to see how he does at TCU on the road. Even though it's a neutral site, it's essentially a road game. I can't wait to see him at Penn State. Those are the answers we're going to find out about him. But guess what? He is the threat that makes a championship-caliber offense go. And he doesn't take up runs away from your superstar tailbacks who combine for 250 yards on the ground. And he makes your receivers, every single one of them, look good. The only time the receivers didn't look good was when he threw a back shoulder fade to pass Campbell 35 yards down the field, and Campbell couldn't track the ball because that's not his skill set. Otherwise, Haskins looked borderline perfect in this game. And I know people are going to say, oh, Bax is talking about Haskins again. Yeah. Well, guess what? When you have a quarterback this freaking good on your team, it's ridiculous. You're going to only get one season out of him. And, yeah, one season because he's going to be in the NFL next year.
I just couldn't have been more impressed. Yeah, and again, I think he's going to shatter Joe Germain's single-season passing record. It's kind of a low bar for a school passing record, 3,330 yards. I think he's going to shatter that especially when you throw in. He's going to probably play, more games than Joe Germain did back 20 years ago in 1998. So we know Dwayne Haskins is by far and away the reason that the receivers look better through one game, but still they look a lot better. I'm curious, and this will play out through the season. I tend to think Brian Hartline's going to make a pretty big impact. Not as big of an impact as having the best passing threat at quarterback the Buckeyes have had since Troy Smith, Cardale Jones in the postseason, as you mentioned, but certainly for a whole season since Troy Smith back in 2006. That's 12 years ago. But Brian Hartline taking over for Zach Smith, that's an upgrade. I think, just what type of impact do you think that'll have this season?
Well, here's the thing about that. I know we all have not been pleased with the way that the receivers developed under Zach Smith, but let's also not forget, I can't believe I'm defending Zach Smith here, but let's not forget that Zach Smith coached receivers concurrently at a time where you had Tim Beck calling the plays and you had J.T. Barrett passing the ball. With these I'll go out on a limb and say these receivers wouldn't have looked much different against Oregon State if Zach Smith was still the coach. It's all about the quarterback throwing you the ball, man. It's all about the quarterback who can make the decision to hit you in stride when you're wide open, and you can just get those yards after the catch. It's just I think Brian Hartline's a better coach. I do, because I don't think Zach Smith was particularly great at everything outside of recruiting, where he showed very good chops, and Hartline certainly has to live up to Zach Smith's success on that side of the thing. But Hartline has the ability to literally look at his players and go, do I have to show you how to do this? Because I've literally done this at the NFL level. You should listen to me because I know what the hell I'm talking about. And all those guys in that receivers room, they won't say this, but I can guarantee you they pay way more attention when Brian Hartline tries showing them something than Zach Smith doing it. And that's just going to be the difference of having a former NFL guy who, we've said this before, Hartline has to look at these guys and go, I won championships at Ohio State. I started at Ohio State. I was drafted in the NFL. I made a ton of money in the NFL. Do you want that career? Raise your hands. And every single person there does it. So, yeah, it certainly helps that you have a guy like Hartline there. And I think Hartline is certainly going to be a very good receivers coach because he's clearly here because he loves it. It's not like he needs the money. And that's a great thing for Ohio State. But, I'm not convinced these receivers would have looked any different no matter what. I think we're going to find out more down the stretch of the season the value of having these guys is going to be. Though I will say one thing. I think the receivers blocked a lot better in this game than last year. And maybe part of that is them putting that extra effort in because Hartline, if you remember when he was at OSU, always put in the effort to block. He might have been the greatest blocker, but he put in the effort, that's for sure.
Now, teams can start off a season looking like shit and then end up being really good, right? 2014 Ohio State, they barely beat Navy. I was there covering that, Baltimore Ravens Stadium, and first game of the year, they barely beat Navy, a good Navy team, but they barely beat Navy. Then they lose at home to a mediocre Virginia Tech team. We make fun of Clay Travis now for putting on Twitter what he put, how Ohio State's eliminated. But if we're being honest, every one of us that night would have said, yep, this team, I bet my house this team won't win the national championship this year. And what happened? The Buckeyes won the national championship. Now, I don't think any of these other Big Ten teams are going to win the national championship. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying we got to be careful with small sample sizes. But my God, does Michigan look like the same old Michigan? My God, does Penn State look overrated? My God, does Michigan State look overrated? Wisconsin, too tough to tell. They're probably overrated too. But we don't know. It's 1 week. What do you make of the Big Ten? Because there was, 5 Big Ten teams ranked in the top 14. Everybody's talking up the Big Ten. Bax, is the Big Ten, in your estimation, was a little overrated coming into the season?
I don't know if we can really go there yet. Let's look at those teams we just talked about. Obviously, Ohio State was amazing and looked great in that game. And, yes, there were a couple hiccups on defense, but I think they'll fix those. Wisconsin played like a joker team. It was Western Kentucky, and they beat them by 30-something points and whatever. I do think Alex Hornibrook is one of those guys that people are trying to convince themselves that he's going to be this difference maker for them at quarterback. And really all he has to do is just not throw picks because it's Wisconsin. But I do think Wisconsin's probably not a top 5 team. Top 15 team, yes. Top 5, I don't know about that. I think you look at the big 3 in the East outside of Ohio State. Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan in week 1. Michigan State, I literally couldn't care less about their performance. That's what Sparty does. I said this at the Bucknuts live. I said this watching the game live. That's like the perfect. It's like two trains passing in the night. Utah State always loses a heartbreaker to a major team in the first month of the season, like every year. I remember them doing this at Wisconsin a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, Sparty on opening Friday night every other year lays an egg, looks horrible, squeaks out a disgusting win. I think it was like USF. They beat like 20-2 or 17-2 or something a couple of years ago. You know, it doesn't surprise me that Sparty does that, and Sparty always gets better. I wouldn't be shocked if Sparty goes out and beats Arizona State at Arizona State for the kickoff of Pac-12 After Dark this weekend. That's a 10:45 kick, by the way. I can't wait. The other two teams have much bigger problems. Penn State's offensive line doesn't look any better. And if Penn State's offensive line doesn't look any better, and there's no Saquon Barkley to bail them out of stuff, then that's a problem for Penn State. Because if you remember last year, what happened after Saquon Barkley broke those big runs at Ohio State? He got completely and utterly shut down because the entire defensive line was 2 yards in the backfield every snap. So Penn State's in trouble if those O-linemen aren't going to play at a much higher level than they did against Appy State. That's going to be an Achilles heel for them because you're going to get Trace McSorley killed, who already takes more hits than your average quarterback with his scrambling ability. And then there's that school up north. Braylon Edwards is 100% right. Braylon Edwards was suspended by the Big Ten Network for telling the truth. Braylon Edwards is suspended by the Big Ten Network because the Big Ten Network doesn't want to employ anybody who's critical of the Big Ten. But the truth is, Michigan's offense isn't bad because Shea Patterson's a bad quarterback. Michigan's offense isn't bad necessarily because their O-line's terrible, even though their O-line is terrible. Shea Patterson didn't forget how to play quarterback, but when your offense is sending two guys out in a pattern and trying to have some sort of ridiculous multi-tight end set that everybody has figured out, Jim Harbaugh, you're just not going to be creative enough to do anything about it. Their defense had a rough start, but guess what? Good teams that have a decent offense can overcome that rough start. That school up north is in serious trouble. 2006 was the last time they won a road game against a ranked team. 2005 was the last time they won a road game against a ranked Big Ten team. And they have to go to Northwestern, Ohio State, and Michigan State, all of whom will likely be ranked when they play. And they have to host Wisconsin, Penn State, Nebraska. Good freaking luck. That team looks like 7-5 or 8-4. And they're near the top of my probably overrated to start the season list. I would put Miami of Florida maybe even worse off than them in terms of being overrated. Shout out to Joe Burrow. But that school up north is looking like they're in a lot of trouble because Shea Patterson may be the greatest quarterback ever, but when you have two receivers to throw to and there's 7 guys in coverage and you're getting murdered or you're running for your life on every snap, you don't really have a chance to look good. So this is on Harbaugh. And, man, if they go 7-5 or 8-4 this year, the volcano of fury out of Ann Arbor is going to be through the roof because they can't just throw him away like they did Rich Rod. They've reached a basic competency level underneath him that they're not going to get rid of. And by the way, they've given him a gigantic long-term contract and are all in on their native son. Next year could be fascinating in Ann Arbor if they have as bad a year as it looks like. And I know it's only week 1, but when has Jim Harbaugh's team looked any different than what it's turned out to be? They're the same team from the start of the season to the end of the season. They just execute better.
I love it. I love your passion. I love your work. You can read his column every Sunday. It is The Bucket. It is a must-read every Sunday. Thank you very much to the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell, and thanks to all listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate that. I hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag. Best damn band in the land.